Okay, so let's go ahead. I think we have a good number of folks that we can go ahead and start. So again, morning everybody, and thank you for attending our briefing on our workload analysis and reform approach. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Dr. Meredith Williams, and then she's going to provide a little bit more of purpose and really outcome for today's meeting. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you, Dr. Williams.
Great, thank you. And Gabby, you can move to the next slide. So thank you all for making time to meet with us today. I'm sure this will be the first of many conversations in the coming legislative session about DTSC. There's a lot of energy and focus on the department, which we really appreciate, and we're excited to see where we can go with all of that energy and focus. Today, we are sharing a high-level overview of the findings of our workload analysis. The analysis is something that has been asked for by folks across the board and has been valuable to the department. It's been helpful to the department to take that step back, understand our resources, make sure we know where they're going and what we're getting for the amount of funding we have and for the resources we have. And it really was very enlightening to us to understand, to learn from the process. We've even changed some business processes as a result of the findings. But I'm sure that as you dig into this, first with this overview today, and as I'm certain many of you will go deeper and deeper into not just the executive summary that we've shared with you today, but into the more detailed analyses that will be forthcoming, that you'll have many questions, and I want to make sure you know we'll be very available to talk with you about the findings and to hear from you what it is that you think those findings are telling us. So for today, we'll start with just talking about where does this workload analysis fit in our overall call for a comprehensive reform approach. How does it serve the purpose of that reform discussion? And then we'll move on to the findings. What were some of the high-level findings? Our Chief Deputy Director, Francesca Negri, who I just will take a moment to call out. She won't like it, but I'm going to do it anyway, which is her leadership to get this workload analysis done was extraordinary. We've heard you. I mean, in terms of the importance of sharing this information, we are excited to share it today and excited for these conversations, and no one more so than Francesca Negri. So we'll talk about it. I will say from the outset that the resource gaps we've identified through the process are significant, and there's a reason they're significant. We know that this department, we've been kind of kicking in past administrations for a long time. People have kicked the can down the road. It's been since 1997 since the fees were adjusted. And as a result, it's to be expected that there are places where we need more resources in order to give the protections that we want, especially with regard to environmental justice communities. So with that, I will jump into things, and then, of course, we do want to make sure we have time for Q&A. I'm sure we may not get to all your questions, but again, this is the first of many conversations. So, Gabby, can you move to the next slide, please? So I think whether it's this administration, past administrations, many of you, the independent review panel, the People's Senate, there is a common shared understanding about how important the work of DTSC is, how important it is to manage toxics properly throughout the state, from cradle to grave, and especially because it's just another environmental burden that is affecting our environmental justice communities. We know that so many of the sites that this department works on are in environmental justice communities. And so it's really important for us to get it right. And yet, over time, we've seen additional statutory mandates come along. I believe the count of statutory mandates that have come along since our fees were reset is 92. So that's a lot. That's a lot of legislation and a lot of regulatory changes also. And yet the actual resources that we've been given to do that have not changed that much. They're very flat. So the static fee structure has not allowed us to grow with those additional responsibilities. Next slide, Gabby. And so what does this translate into in terms of what work we can do and how we can do it? Well, it's the bread and butter of what we do. If we don't have the funding, we can't clean up contaminated sites. We've revisited a report from the Center for Creative Land Use Recycling, and it estimated that there were between 150 and 200,000 unaddressed contaminated sites around the state. Just to be clear, those may not be orphan sites per se, but there are quite a number of sites. That's a very credible number if you compare that with estimates that the US EPA has done. So we're not even close to tackling the scale of the problem for cleaning up contaminated sites. We need to disincentivize pollution. If we aren't enforcing aggressively enough, if we aren't enforcing fairly enough, we're not creating a level playing field. We're not making sure that people are motivated to comply with our laws. And ultimately that leads to more toxic releases or improperly transported materials, and ultimately exposure to wildlife, to aquatic resources, and of course, to our communities. So we need to be able to hold polluters accountable through our enforcement efforts. And lastly, we're never getting ahead of this. We're not breaking the cycle. We have a Safer Consumer Products program that came out of the Green Chemistry Initiative that really can help us change the paradigm of removing toxic chemicals from consumer products. And yet it's not resourced in a way that allows us to have the impact we think we could have given more resources. Next slide, please. So this is just one piece of the puzzle in terms of what the administration will be talking about with you over this budget cycle and throughout the year, which is we know we need a comprehensive reform. Yes, we need governance. We need governance that has the hooks in it to make sure the department can be held accountable, and that we communicate transparently, and that our decisions are given enough daylight so that people have confidence in the work that we do. So we know we need to have a governance structure that's really important. So has always been agreed upon. And what was, the independent review panel was kind of a taste of that, but we've gone beyond that. But that's one piece of the puzzle. The other thing is, what should the department be doing? What's the bread and butter of, do you want us to tackle toxics in products? Do we need to revisit the hazardous waste management plan? Are we enforcing enough? Should we be cleaning up more sites? So what programs should the department deliver? And then the administration has a clear vision for what that might look like based on the workload analysis. And the question then becomes, what fees would support that level of service? And do it in a way that disincentivizes creation and use and disposal of hazardous materials in the first place. So that this fits into that discussion. It helps us really answer that first question about what programs. It's the link between the first question and the second question, which is, if we want to deliver this particular level of service, this is what resources would be required, and then of course the fees would follow. Next slide, please. So in the governor's budget, you saw, and again, you'll be getting more detail on this in the coming weeks, it's very similar proposal to last year, which is a streamlined fees structure where we eliminate a couple of fees and make things much clearer. We create a sustainable funding model that really allows us to reset fees and to not get into the same problem that we've been in, which is to have a static fee structure. And that's because a board would be put in place that would have fee authority and would enable things to be adjusted as need be. And then, of course, in the budget, there is a one-time funding to really jumpstart some of the cleanup work, to really tackle some of these orphan sites and contaminated sites around the state, to give local communities more resources, to get some regulatory certainty around what's the level of contamination in brownfields. Investigate those so that people have the certainty they need to make a decision about how to put that land into reusable purposes. And lastly, we want to build on our successful job training program associated with the Exide project by developing and standing up additional programs for job training to give people skills to work on cleanups so that they benefit from that work in their communities. I haven't called out the Exide funding. There is Exide funding to allow us also to continue to tackle the intended properties, the 3,200 properties. Next slide, please. So focusing in on the workload analysis, I think it's important to understand what it is and what it isn't. We analyzed only our core programs here. We are, with the exception of our IT shop, where we had done some workload analyses over the years, and we were able to have enough detail there to include some of the key findings in this executive summary. There are additional workload analyses that will be forthcoming in the next few months for the support programs. It does allow us to discuss what are the service levels. We did highlight throughout the document some of the program improvements we've made. What we found is that, again, when we invest in the department delivers. And so you'll see that there's a culture of continuous improvement. We are really making great progress on program efficiencies, for instance, in our brownfields program and our permitting program. And then this provides the transparency. I know that this is, I will say that this department has pushed hard to be able to provide the information to you because we know how important it is to you. And then ultimately, the big takeaway is what do we estimate to be our programmatic gaps in terms of the resources that are needed to tackle certain priorities. We did not tackle every single priority that we could. We did not, for instance, estimate the resource gap that would need to be closed to have a fully implemented biomonitoring program. So there are certain select gaps, but it facilitates the conversation, and we think the information is adequate to keep us moving. It is not a detailed budget document. It is not a budget change proposal. And it is, as I say, it's not a comprehensive analysis of every single authority that we have. Next slide, Gabby. Overall, I don't think the findings are going to be a surprise to anybody. There is a misalignment between our responsibilities and our resources. It's getting in our way of being able to deliver on our mandates and take on new activities. Some of the findings show us what we can deliver when we do have additional resources, and we include those examples just so people understand. We have made some judgment calls about which of the gaps are the most important, and that's part of what shows up in terms of which gaps we analyzed and which ones we didn't, because difficult decisions have to be made, and this is the process we're embarking on, which is where are we going to put the resources? So you won't see every gap analyzed, but you will see that we have good estimates for what it would take to close the gaps in some key areas. So with that, I think, I'm going to turn it over to Francesca, and she's going to walk you through additional details on the individual program analyses, and then we can have some discussion. Thank you very much. Francesca?
Good morning, everybody, and thanks so much for taking time out of what is probably an incredibly busy week for you to go through these. And I'm going to try and keep it pretty high level so that we can get to some Q&A if you want to dive more deeply into the results. So Gabby, can you bring up the next slide, please? Thank you. So as you can see, and as Meredith indicated, phase one of our workload analyses includes our 6 core programs, 4 of which are under the hazardous waste management program, our Safer Consumer Products program, I'll call that SAFER here on out, our site mitigation program, which we call cleanup. And we also, as Meredith indicated, included our Office of Environmental Management, or OEIM, because of its critical relationship to the program's ability to deliver on their missions, and the fact that we have a lot of data with respect to our resource gaps in this particular area. So it is included in this phase of the workload analyses. So the approach for the workload methodology was to use data from core programs. And what I mean by data is every DTSC employee records their time on a daily basis into a system, and they code that time to activities or to projects so that we can run reports that show us, how they're spending their time. And so through an outside contractor, we looked at this data, including current staffing levels, available employee hours, and program deliverables such as number of permits delivered, or facilities investigated, or sites cleaned up. And what we found by looking at this data is the majority of staff time is being spent on technical duties. 63 to 75% are spent doing work that's specific to delivery of that program or that activity. The remaining time was spent on administrative functions such as mandatory state training, training that staff need to stay current on their technical skills, and improvement projects to better the efficiency of a particular activity or program. The analyses did identify some significant shortage of resources necessary to deliver on some of our statutory authorities. As Meredith indicated, we did not analyze all of our statutory authorities and the potential activities that we should be performing, but rather prioritize that based on the administration's priorities, as well as feedback that we've received from you and other stakeholders over the years. So what you're going to see in these gap analyses are those types of programs identified. Gabby, can you advance, please? So I'm going to start with our permitting division, which is under our hazardous waste management program. Permitting oversees approximately 100 facilities throughout the state that treat, store, or dispose of hazardous waste. We've invested a lot of time and resources with your support, so thank you so much, over the years, and it's paid off. And so the number of resources that we identified in this particular program as deficient is smaller than the other programs I'm going to later discuss. The program has implemented multiple process improvements that have significantly reduced the time it takes to make permit decisions and the strength of those permits. We have more enforceable permits now, more legally defensible permits because of the work that we've done. We've developed, as Meredith indicated, a culture of continuous improvement. So we have multiple employees that are now certified as Lean Six Sigma black belts, green belts, yellow belts. And so we take a continuous improvement approach to our business processes, particularly in this program. So the result is the average time it takes to make a permit decision used to be 4.5 years before we started on this road, and now it's at 2.5 years. And prior to these reforms in 2013, DTSC made 1 permit decision, and in fiscal year 18, made 18 permit decisions. The goal is to average 16 permit decisions. As you probably are aware, they come in cycles. The permits themselves expire not on necessarily a flow basis, but we're working on that. So if we are able to make an average of 16 permit decisions annually, will eventually achieve our goal of making 90% of our permit decisions within 2 years. Again, because of the resources invested in this program, we didn't identify many gaps, but we did identify gaps in 2 key areas. Integrating the violation scoring procedure into our permit decision process was identified as a resource gap. And VSP was a significant policy change. Under this process, a facility receives an annual inspection score, as well as a facility score that aggregates 10 years of inspection scores. The permitting division uses these scores to make permit decisions or to require permit modifications that decrease the likelihood of releases and contamination. And it really does help the facilities to comply with the law. An additional area of gap that we noted is in our CEQA document review. The department receives CEQA document from other agencies, relying upon our expertise to ensure that that they're able to mitigate potential environmental harm, and we are under-resourced in that area to perform that particular activity. Next slide. The next program we analyzed was our Emergency Enforcement Emergency Response Division, or EERD. This program is responsible for overseeing inspections and enforcement of over 100,000 hazardous waste generators and facilities. And that provides local communities with confidence that those facilities located in those areas are complying with the law. It's also responsible for providing emergency response hazardous waste cleanup and has been integral to accelerating the cleanup activities associated with the devastating California wildfires recently. EERD's received some limited resources over the past several years, and with those resources has been able to increase inspections, particularly in vulnerable communities. They've increased its annual inspection rate of transporters from an average of 50 to 144 in fiscal year 18, and is now inspecting an average of 14 metal recycling facilities each year. Just to give you a context for those numbers, there are approximately 900 registered transporters in the state of California and over 2,000 metal recycling facilities. So that gives you a little bit of context. Additionally, EERD's implemented its own improvements to its programs. They've reduced the amount of time to assess and approve an administrative penalty from 259 days to 98 days, and reduce the amount of time from when an inspection occurs until an inspection report is sent to the operator from an average of 37 days to 15.5 days. And they've also developed a comprehensive inspector training program. The workload analyses identified some key areas of resource deficits in this area. The first is to increase transporter inspections from once every 5 years to once every 3 years. We've found that when transporters are not consistently inspected, there's a high rate of violations, particularly in vulnerable communities. The program is deficient resources to provide adequate technical guidance and support to the CUPA program. CUPA is the California United Program Agencies, which are local agencies that are certified by the Secretary of Cal EPA to implement their activities over which they have jurisdiction for hazardous waste management in their local communities. And providing technical guidance to them through training and guidance documents is crucial to them having the skills necessary to adequately enforce their jurisdiction. And finally, the resource gap, the workload analyses identified a resource gap in the 673 related to violation scoring procedure. EERD has a significant role in the implementation of the violation scoring procedure. They're responsible for developing all of the business processes, maintaining a tracking system for violations, creating an administrative record for each of those facilities upon which that score is based. It's really critical. These resources are so critical to ensuring that this pioneering legislation achieves its full goal of ensuring that permitted facilities comply with the law, and that the process of holding them accountable is very transparent to the public and understandable to the public. Ultimately, this is going to reduce violations, and it's also going to help the facility to comply with the law. Next slide, please. Next up is our Office of Criminal Investigations, also under our Hazardous Waste Management Program. This is the only program in Cal EPA with sworn peace officers who pursue businesses and individuals who criminally violate hazardous waste control laws. These individuals are specially trained to investigate the most egregious criminal offenses and those which pose a significant danger to human health and the environment. OCI conducts statewide investigations in concert or jointly with federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies, and the multi-agency investigations focus on environmental justice communities to stop active polluters from releasing toxic waste into the environment. They're really pivotal to Cal EPA's ability to effectively pursue criminal activity. Examples of OCI success recently include an investigation in Yolo County where thousands of tons of hazardous waste ash were removed from agricultural fields, which then prevented the future illegal disposal of thousands of tons of hazardous waste. Another example is when they were recently provided limited resources to pursue distributors and sellers of children's metal-containing jewelry. When OCI inspected 28 jewelry stores in 2017, 21 of them had violations. So the workload analyses identified the need for additional positions to increase our ability to conduct approximately 50 to 100 annual inspections to address some key areas where we're seeing some heightened activity. And the first would be illegal cannabis grows in California. These typically involve illegal pesticides that are illegal disposed of and are extremely hazardous. We've identified the need to increase the number of inspections we conduct as a result of complaints that are submitted to Cal EPA and other state, local, and federal agencies, particularly those in vulnerable communities. We have hundreds and hundreds of complaints that come in, and we're only resourced to investigate a small number of those. And then finally, increasing the number of inspections DTSC conducts on distributors and sellers of metals-containing jewelry. We all know the impact of lead on particularly on sensitive populations, including children, and additional investigation is absolutely necessary in this area. Next slide, please. The final program under our hazardous waste management program is our policy and program support branch, which is basically provides the legal framework or the regulatory framework under which our hazardous waste management program operates. It's responsible for developing and interpreting hazardous waste management statutes and regulations, and for managing the federal RCRA grant program and maintaining our status as a RCRA authorized state. The work provides regulatory and policy foundation to ensure that waste is managed legally and safely in California. So in 2018, fiscal year 18, PPSB responded to more than 6,000 regulatory questions that assisted hazardous waste inspectors, industry, environmental managers, governmental regulators, and the public with the provisions of complicated hazardous waste control laws. So they provide all of that technical guidance to those that need it. They provided more than 700 written responses to partner agencies and the public while tracking data for the movement of electronic waste. And then finally, they conducted more than 75 evaluations of the site-specific applications for certification, providing authorization for activities related to things like certified appliance recyclers or transportable treatment unit operators. So the workload analysis showed that PPSB is resource deficient in the following areas. It's resource deficient in its ability to conduct its RCRA authorization process, which is necessary to retain our delegated authority. And why that's so important is that when we have that delegated authority, we are able to, through the RCRA authorization process, provide a single set of standards for hazardous waste management. And if we lose that delegation, then we have different standards. The federal government standards, the state standards may not always be consistent, and they would need to be determined for each site-specific situation, which makes it very complicated and would likely result in an increase because of the confusion in violations or in failing to safely manage RCRA waste. So it's really important that we maintain this delegated authority. The other area that we identified a deficiency in resources is specifically related to not only this administration's priorities, but of course, the feedback that we receive from you all and from other stakeholders, and that's to renew the pollution prevention program to help businesses implement pollution prevention principles that ultimately result in less waste generation and fewer toxic chemicals and conserves water and energy by reducing air pollution. So ultimately downstream, this helps to reduce contaminated sites and the need to clean up contaminated sites throughout the state of California. Next slide, please. So moving on, we analyzed our Safer Consumer Products program. DTSC's SAFER program is charged with accelerating the use of safer chemicals in consumer products. To do this, the program requires manufacturers of products that contain chemicals of concern or those deemed to pose risks to human health and the environment to search for safer alternatives. Since the program's implementation in 2014, SAFER's resources have supported building a new innovative program comprised of a multidisciplinary team of scientists and engineers and employing a science-based approach while leveraging multi-million-dollar markets and manufacturers' interests. We have, when we have a vacancy in this program, we have a nationwide interest of people who are drawn to what this program does. They are so excited about being a part of this program. We have wonderful candidate pools to fill our vacancies for the program. So along with multiple products in the queue, SAFER successfully regulated the first 3 priority products and is putting them through the alternative analysis process. They consistently provide transparency and accountability through their management system, their biennial Green Ribbon Science Panel meetings, and the online resource and submission portal called CalSAFER. One example of SAFER's early successes was the action they took on children's foam padded sleeping products, which are also known as nap mats, which initiated change in a $325 million industry, preventing the exposure of potentially millions of infants and toddlers to carcinogenic chemicals. However, I will say additional resources were identified as being critical to meeting the statutory mandates for this program and to fully implementing a program with the capability to make a meaningful impact on the large universe of consumer products within our authority. Without augmentation of resources, SAFER will be forced to shift resources to the regulatory response phase of their process, to compliance and enforcement, and the pipeline of priority products that identify chemicals of concern for DTSC's focus will be significantly delayed. In other words, our capacity for new products will be reduced by roughly 80%. And the program's ability to process more impactful and complex consumer products will be significantly limited with the current staffing levels. Next slide, please. And then there's our cleanup program. Our cleanup program's purpose is to investigate contaminated sites, and when contamination is found, to oversee the removal of hazardous waste so that sites can be returned to productive use. The program also oversees voluntary cleanups. We have developers who come to us, and we oversee their remediation efforts to return sites to productive use. And we manage, SAFER manages, cleanup manages a grant program and provides cost recovery support to the Financial Planning Office. As Meredith indicated, there are approximately 200,000 contaminated sites in California, and we are responsible for cleaning up sites for which there are no responsible parties identified. Recently, the program's only had enough resources to conduct cleanups at sites where the contamination is already known and its impact already characterized. It does not have sufficient resources to investigate sites at which there is suspected contamination based on prior industry use. Nearly a third of people in California live less than 1 mile from a cleanup site that DTSC oversees, and 46% of those sites are in environmental justice community. The program's work revitalizes communities by working with developers to ensure that properties are safe to build on. Currently, they oversee approximately 1,800 sites, or 1% of the estimated 200,000 contaminated sites. Additionally, there are 15,000 known contaminated sites that need assessment and potential cleanup, including 8,600 dry cleaner sites whose chemical legacy can threaten groundwater, as well as people in nearby structures. The cleanup program revitalizes these communities by working with developers to ensure safe activities and clean properties. Examples of the recent program accomplishments include the old Sacramento Rail Yards cleanup right down the street from us, which is the largest infill project west of the Mississippi. It will result in 10,000 housing units, including affordable apartments and a 17-story county courthouse, as well as a Kaiser Permanente medical complex and a new Major League Soccer stadium. So also, this cleanup program has discovered contamination from dry cleaner sites in Delano, which is an environmental justice community. And then they've taken steps to protect people and surrounding businesses and residents by installing indoor air filtration systems where dangerous levels of chemical vapors were identified. And then finally, another example of the type of work that they do is they protected the community of Jackson from contaminated mine tailings resulting from the past operation of the historical Argonaut mine. And they've worked cooperatively with federal, state, and local agencies to build an interim dam, which is, and they're now working to replace that interim solution with a permanent structure to safely contain the contaminated tailings. As I indicated, the resource gaps here are related to the failure or insufficient resources to conduct a site discovery program. That means that no action is being taken on those 200,000 properties identified. By increasing its service levels, the cleanup program could investigate sites and determine the extent and type of contamination and take some initial steps to remediate that contamination. This will restore contaminated sites, more often than not located in vulnerable communities, to useful purpose. It will stimulate the economy and reduce exposure to harmful chemicals. The resource limitations that we've identified here are provided in 3 different case scenarios or 3 different service levels. And these estimates are for initial work, and you can see what we could accomplish with that initial work in terms of the as it correlates to the service levels or resource needs. I want to be clear that these resources would be dedicated solely for the site discovery and investigation process, and that the cost for each of these scenarios would raise by approximately 50% in year 4 as the investigation becomes more in depth and moves into the actual construction or implementation phase of remedy strategies. So that is our cleanup program. And then let's move on to our final program. Next slide, please. Our Office of Environmental Information, OEIM. They deliver, this is basically our IT program, which delivers our information management, our technology resources and services. They leverage common solutions and provide a secure infrastructure throughout the department so that we basically can do our jobs. The work that they do is so critical to the delivery of all of our programs and services. They're significantly under-resourced to support DTSC at their current resource level, and importantly, to adequately respond to cybersecurity threats, which are becoming increasingly problematic in the public sector. Modernization is crucial for our data management and governance infrastructure, to supporting our programs, to reducing cybersecurity threats. We've had 2 workload analyses on this program in the past 5 years, both resulting in a similar diagnosis about the program. The most recent indicates we're deficient about 18.5 positions for the current workload. And we've identified a need of approximately $20 million to update our legacy system, some of our legacy systems, to improve information security and provide appropriate staffing levels for the current workload. if there's an increase in any service levels that we've identified in this workload analyses or other areas, there would need to be a commensurate increase in OEI resources as well. Any of the resource or any of the gaps that we affiliate with OEIM in terms of the contract needs to upgrade legacy systems, of course, would be subject to the oversight of the Department of Technology and their project development process. So these are estimates at this time. One indicator of our ability to successfully, however, implement projects under the oversight of CDT includes the update of our cost recovery management system, which is on schedule for a 2021 implementation. It's on schedule and within budget. And so we've made a lot of programmatic improvements in our IT office over the past several years, and those are bearing fruit in our ability to deliver successfully on our IT projects. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Meredith to conclude the presentation and then to open up the floor to any questions you might have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Francesca. So hopefully that provides you with a whirlwind tour of various areas in the department where we analyzed our resources, identified some key gaps. As I said earlier, this really folds into a larger discussion about the need for a comprehensive solution to making sure that DTSC can undertake adequate environmental protection. So to reiterate, the governor's budget does include a revised proposed fee structure that has a sustainable funding model, and really that board would provide the transparency and is integral to having sustainable funding in that it would allow us to revise the fees as needed. And you'll be seeing more details on the one-time expenditure also in the coming weeks. Next slide, please. So thank you again for all your time. I look forward to all of you digging into the executive summary and the more detailed information as it starts to be rolled out. We know that this is going to take some really thoughtful discussions. I'm very proud to be part of this administration, which has really stood up and said, we own this. We are going to take on DTSC and the challenges around transparency, accountability, fiscal stability. And I think that commitment is underscored by this one-time investment and by the release of this workload analysis. And so I see the pieces coming together for us to work with you and with our stakeholders to really figure out what is the path forward. Are we on the right path forward? And how can we make a DTSC that really meets its critical mission? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Diana to facilitate questions and answers.
Awesome, thank you.
And Gabby, yeah, I think Gabby, we don't need to, I'd rather see faces than the slides.
Awesome. So we have the next 15 minutes for any questions and answers that you all might have. And, you can definitely use the chat to include your questions. And then if not, go ahead and raise your hand in the feature and we'll definitely call you on the queue. So any questions or clarifications?
We have Lena Gonzalez next. You can unmute your mic.
Okay.
Yes, hello. Thank you so much. I appreciate this presentation. I have a question about the jobs program that was detailed. Can you elaborate on that program?
Francesca,
The one for cleanup, I'm sorry.
Francesca, do you want to take that? You want me to take it? Doesn't matter to me.
So building on the success, and Meredith can add to that, and I think Anna might be here. Building on the success that we have with the XSide program, which was to partner with LA Trade Tech to develop a training program for community members to participate on the cleanup of the residential properties and to participate in the the economic and work available in these communities to do this work. We're proposing to expand that program in concert with our acceleration of cleaning up contaminated properties throughout the state by duplicating that success in other communities, so that as we're cleaning up contaminated properties in communities, we're able to offer training programs that enable those community members to participate not only in the cleanup of the properties that are funded with the governor's budget, but to have ongoing employment opportunities with those new skills. So that is the vision for the program. It's to expand it to more cleanup sites located throughout the state, particularly those that are in vulnerable communities, and to use that success and move it forward.
Thank you. And then the other question, just to follow up, it's kind of similar, is the Safer Consumer Products program that has, I believe, the 56 positions open. Can you elaborate on what type of pool of, where are we looking at in terms of people that we can apply to those positions?
So I'd like to make sure I clarify your question. Are you saying if we were to go ahead and get the additional resources, where would we recruit? I want to make sure I understand the question.
That's correct. Yes.
Oh, so maybe there was some. We do not have a problem recruiting in this program.
Right.
This is a program that is very cutting edge and really is, trying to change the paradigm of how we get toxics out of our everyday lives and the products we use. And the talent in that program is extraordinary. Not that we don't have great talent throughout the department, but we also, as a department, have really been looking at diversity and racial equity and have taken a close look at, are we recruiting in ways that foster diversity, the diversity that we're looking for? And Safer Consumer Products has already, as we've filled vacancies, done outreach to different organizations than we have in the past in order to try to make sure we have a diverse candidate pool. So whether it's toxicologists, environmental scientists, engineers, economists, we have had really great success recruiting for this program.
Thank you very much for that. And the reason I'm asking about those two is because I want to, and I know we're being sensitive to these communities, but since, representing the Southeast communities, I want to ensure that those communities have access to that Safer Consumer Product Program opportunities, and not just the cleanup, because it could be viewed as very insensitive that they're now being asked to clean up, where Exide had polluted. And so I just want to be sensitive to that they have those opportunities as well, because there's so many environmental scientists and engineers and top level Southeast residents that could definitely apply. And I agree with you. Thank you very much for acknowledging the diversity needed.
Well, I would just say that if you have thoughts about how we could double down on our recruitment efforts to reach these critical populations in California, we would welcome that conversation.
Absolutely.
In fact, all of Cal EPA would welcome that conversation. It's a very lively discussion we're having right now.
Thank you very much.
There are no other questions in the queue.
Okay. So at this moment, if we have no additional questions.
We have
Marie.
Josh Tucker.
And
okay.
Anne Marie.
Okay, so let's go with Josh and then Marie. I'm with you. Go ahead, Josh.
Okay, and if this gets too weedy, we can deal with this later. Just a clarification on the discussion for the cleanup program, on the gap analysis. There's two sets of potential costs. There's cleanup scenario, say one that has 50 site discoveries and 63 site initiations. And I've kind of a two-part question. I'm wondering, I'm assuming those are 50 site discoveries annually. And then the second part to that question is the additional cost on the cleanup scenario. Mentioned about 28 million in contracts. Is that contract work? Is that estimated to be the actual cleanup work? And because I thought Francesca mentioned that the cleanup work might be delayed to like several out year, so it's not necessarily tied to the same year, but I guess we would roll with it. But I'm just trying to understand how that all works in concert.
Yeah. And I'll start and then turn it over to Francesca, which is that, fundamentally, it's very hard to estimate what the cost would be for actual cleanup, until you get to that investigations phase. So that is why the estimates we have more confidence in estimates that have to do with the investigation phase. Francesca?
Yeah, and so it's not to say that no cleanup work would happen with those resources, Josh, to your astute question. But likely this is what our estimate to begin investigating and site discovery and investigation of those sites. So the contract costs that you're identifying are really related to those activities. Obviously, if there is a cleanup remedy available with those funds, we'll take steps to fully maximize the use of those to begin cleanup. But as Meredith indicated, it's a really tough thing to estimate cleanup costs before you know the nature and extent of contamination.
So the contract dollars are more to do the more technical work that would be contracted out for the sampling and that kind of stuff as part of the site discovery.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Marie, do you want to go?
Thanks very much for this presentation. And I look forward to reading through the report. Just kind of a big picture question. I appreciate on the cleanup side that with these additional positions, we know what to expect, what will change, how many sites we'd be able to see. Do you have a similar, when you identified gaps on the permitting and the enforcement and the other regulatory responsibilities, what is, will the report lay out kind of a similar metric? I think the secretary last year talked about wanting to have kind of more, to have more metrics which we can measure performance. And so if you will fill the gap, what does that mean in terms of, what would we see?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you're right. The secretary has committed to that. And in fact, the department has done a lot of work in its strategic plan to make sure we have well-defined metrics so people know what to expect in terms of our performance, which will help people hold us accountable. And yes, behind each of those gap analyses, there are details as to, what we're saying could be accomplished with additional resources. Francesca, I don't know if you want to expand on that, but yeah, that's very much in keeping with our intent.
Right, and in addition to those levels, Marie, we are developing performance metrics for the department in terms of holding us accountable when we say we're going to, like with the permitting program is a really good example of establishing performance metrics within that program, and that's happening across the entire department. So yes, to the greater detail on what we would be delivering for the monies, as well as just overarching performance metrics that hold the department accountable for its mission.
And I would only add that we are we're pushing hard to make sure that there's a dashboard on our website that really lets people know how we're doing against the metrics that we're tracking.
Great. I look forward to looking at those.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions in the group? No, I don't see any hands raised or on the chat. I think with that, I will definitely pass it off to Dr. Williams to close it, but just a quick reminder, I know I had a couple of discussions with some of y'all on this call about having additional conversations about the core briefings we're going to be having. Francesca basically went through was really high level briefings on the programs. We do want to, provide you a little bit more of the methodology, how we came about with the hours. We have all that information. And we are going to be offering a little bit more information within those core briefings at the end of this month and beginning of next month. We're going to be sending out an email inviting folks to attend all three, if you want to attend specifically on the core programs, or one of three, depending on your interest. And that's something that's going to be coming soon by next week for sure. Okay. And
Thank you,
then
Deanna.
Oh,
Marie?
Marie?
Just real quick, I know you guys have another briefing, just a big picture briefing for. Are you doing one for stakeholders next week, and then are you sending out a link today with the actual workload with the actual report?
So actually, what we gave you for this discussion was a kind of a preview. We're doing our final design and making sure we've dotted all the I's and T's. So that's more of a discussion version for your benefit for today. We will get you the final version. It will be posted and available, and that we're pushing to get that out tomorrow. But definitely, the stakeholders will have that in advance of our discussions next week. And we have, and Deanna, you can talk about the details here if we need to, but we have 2 separate briefings, one for community-based organizations next week, and then one for industry. And we'll also be sitting down with the LAO at some point to walk them through it.
So yeah, so if you have, Marie, or anybody on the call have any specific groups that haven't received this invite, please let me know. We're more than happy to share the invite with them. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, so Dr. Williams.
We have one question in the chat.
Sure.
How would a community member apply to the program Senator Gonzalez inquired about?
Well, we are quite a long way from that in terms of having to, that's all dependent on enacting the budget and then standing up a program that would allow people to apply. We have to find partners similar to LA Trade Tech who would work with us to establish these programs in different areas of the state. So we're quite a long way off from the application process, but obviously communication is going to be critically important to get the word out about, how people can engage and how what that application process would look like. So, but if they're interested for the Exide program, I would suggest they contact us either through Deanna or Ana Mascareñas, and we can. If you're talking about the Exide work program that's already up and running, definitely we can put you in touch with folks associated with that. Okay. Well, thank you for the time and for the great questions. We'll continue the conversation, of course. Please, we want as much feedback as we can get. We learned a tremendous amount last year through AB 995, now AB 1, in terms of, what the concerns were, what folks were looking for from the department. And we expect to learn equally as much through this conversations about our service levels. So we appreciate the time. Thank you very much. Please be in touch.